I was completely blindsided. Actually, they called the meeting the night before, and I didn't have to be there until 10 o'clock. And so I was in my workout gear. I had my pre-workout and my shaker, like waiting for this meeting to start, not thinking anything about it. And I'd been there almost 5 years at this point. My coworker had been there 7 years at this point. Neither one of us had any idea. I'm like, I'm fixing to have this meeting and then I'm going to go work out, and no idea whatsoever. And I just remember sitting there and them saying, hey, we're going to take the sports medicine department in a new direction. And I'm going, what do you mean? And they're like, this is going to be effective immediately. I need your keys. But like, what do you mean? And so, I left that meeting just completely devastated. And I'm sitting there thinking the same thing. I'm like, yeah, this is not cool. What the heck do I do now? I never saw it coming. So I really let myself just like wallow in self-pity for 3 days. And then I was like, okay, it's time to start thinking about this stuff. That's truly what my identity was, is I'm a young, independent woman. I can do anything. And then it was like, okay, but not anything. My name is Mikayla Moore, and I am undone.
Hey friend, I'm glad you're here. Welcome to yet another episode of Becoming UnDone, the podcast for those who dare bravely, risk mightily, and grow relentlessly. I'm Toby Brooks, a speaker, an author, and a professor. I've spent much of the last 2 decades working as an athletic trainer and strength coach in the professional, collegiate, and high school sports settings. And over the years, I've grown more and more fascinated with what sets high achievers apart, and how failures that can suck in the moment end up being exactly the push we needed to propel us along our path to success. Each week on Becoming UnDone, I invite new guests to examine how high achievers can transform from falling apart to falling into place. I'd like to emphasize that this show is entirely separate from my role as a professor, but it's my attempt to apply what I've learned and what I'm learning, and to share with others about the mindsets of high achievers. You know, it's a big week in my world. I guess I should say I am finishing packing up the house for our move next month. The wife's in Peru on a mission trip, while the daughter's finishing up week 3 of her 3-week language learning intensive in Germany. And the son started his first job this week. Our Life 360 doesn't know what to do with the 4 of us spread across 3 continents at the moment. On top of that, I have exactly 1 week, 1 module, 1 test left on my new degree. Something I hadn't even considered until I interviewed guest Ram Hadass in episode 38. Now, exactly 50 episodes later, I'm graduating. So I'd consider the chance to crank out a new episode a treat, and maybe even a bit of procrastination if I get real honest. I read a quote this week that really stuck with me. Enjoy writing badly. If you're a recovering perfectionist like I am, you know the pain associated with doing something poorly. It's anything but enjoyable. But also, while I was mowing this week, Spotify decided to drop one of my old episodes into my mix. And let's just say it was not so hot. I can say in the past 1.5 years that I've gotten better. I've figured some stuff out. But it also reminded me that growth is a process. And what I create today, I'll probably view as awful a year from now. The point is to let the product be the product, but really lean in and enjoy the process, because that's where we all get better. Freeze, Texas native Mikayla Moore early dreams of becoming a sports journalist didn't materialize in college. But that allowed her to pursue other career options in sports, where she eventually landed on athletic training. After completing a bachelor's in exercise and sports science and a master's in athletic training, she briefly considered working in pro baseball, but the right opportunity never seemed to come along. She then spent the next 2 years in a high school setting before moving to the collegiate level, where she was satisfied but not exactly fulfilled. However, all that changed when an unexpected job loss rocked her world. But within 3 weeks, she had not only steadied herself, but landed a job in pro sports with the Milwaukee Brewers organization, where she's stayed ever since. Hear Mikayla tell her story in episode 89, No Bad Days. Joining me this week is a former student, now a dear friend, who is joining us all the way from the Dominican Republic. So welcome, Mikayla Moore.
Thank you.
We had planned to do this one a few months back, and you got called up to, I believe, go to Milwaukee as part of the big club. as you call it. We'll get into that, but our focus today is to look at your story and how it's taken some unexpected turns. You might not have scripted it the way it unfolded, but super proud of you and what you've accomplished in such a relatively short career.
Yeah, it doesn't feel super short at this point. It's been 9, almost 10 years. And every day I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I just graduated.
Right.
Well, I haven't been practicing for 10 years.
Yeah. I always start off with a little bit of an easy question. What did you want to be growing up and why?
When I was little, I wanted to be a lawyer because I can talk to a brick wall and convince it to my side. But as I got a little bit older, I got into like sports broadcasting. And that's actually originally what I went to Texas Tech for, was to do sports broadcasting. And they ended up dropping the sports broadcasting major and it was just journalism. And I was like, oh, I've got a lot of opinions and I'm not very good at keeping them to myself. Changed my major and got into exercise sports science, not really knowing what I wanted to do with it, just knowing that I loved sports. And they have a little intro class and it's, here's what you can do with this degree. And I was like, oh, I took sports medicine in high school. That was cool. I guess I'll do that. Doing that and, like strength conditioning, that kind of side of things. But I'm definitely glad I picked what I did.
Yeah. So you grew up in East Texas and found your way to Lubbock. So I guess talk me through maybe those high school years. What was your driving motivator and what led you to go all the way to Texas Tech?
So I have an older brother and watched him play sports growing up. So I also played sports, but I went to a really small high school. So like I was in the marching band and I was president of the honor society and I was in one act play, but I was also on the cheer team, the volleyball team, the basketball team, you name it. I did it. I played golf on Mondays. I ran the cross country meet on Tuesday. I was keeping the book at the baseball games on Thursdays, small town stuff like that. But cheerleading is really what I loved. And so I actually ended up at Texas Tech to cheer.
It seems like I do recall that. So you go to Texas Tech with this goal of initially law and then sports journalism, and that falls through. At that point of your career, what did success look like for you? And had you really been able to get real specific with it, or was it still just this nebulous thing you were chasing after?
Well, I feel like at that point in time, success to me was getting good grades, learning as much as I could about a lot of different stuff. A lot of the electives I took were random, like history of rock and roll, and just really wanted to absorb a lot of stuff. But I also had this like future goal in mind that I wanted to work baseball. And so I started studying Spanish more and ended up with a minor in Spanish. And that doesn't mean that I speak Spanish or that I spoke Spanish at that point in time. But I feel like at that point, success for me was just showing up every day as the best version of myself, trying to learn, trying to decide, what truly are my goals in moving forward with my life and how do I get there?
So you make a bit of a pivot. It's still involved in sport, but maybe not in the direction that you initially thought. What was it about sports medicine that really clicked for you?
I've always been really good at science. I think the human body is incredible and amazing. And when I was taking that intro to exercise sports science class, they were like, oh, if you like science, this is a good track for you. If you're more of like a social person, maybe it's exercise psychology. If you're deep diving into the science, maybe it's exercise physiology. And obviously I didn't declare athletic training because that wasn't an option in undergrad at Tech. But I started looking into the athletic training student program at Tech and started talking with people in that. And one of my professors was one of the athletic trainers on staff for volleyball. So I talked to her a little bit and I was like, I really do enjoy the science part of it. Maybe not the like molecular, cellular side of it, but so when I joined the student program, it really just solidified, yeah, this is it. I get to be creative in different ways. I do get to learn every day something new, and it presents challenges. And that's something that I've always looked for in terms of not being so monotonous day to day. I didn't want a 9 to 5. I didn't want I'm going to sit in a cubicle and stare at a computer screen type job. So it really just clicked for me that having a good background in science and wanting to be around sports, that athletic training was going to be a good pick for me.
Yeah. Did you feel like that transition was something that you grieved, losing out on sports journalism? Were you running toward sports medicine so much that it didn't really impact you?
So I'm going to age myself a little bit here if I didn't already, but when I was 16, I don't know if you remember, ESPN did this little short thing that they did on one of their sports centers, and they basically picked random people off the street and were like, okay, we're going to give you this piece of like footage, and then you're going to give us a play-by-play review of it. And there was a prize and stuff at the end. And I was 16 years old and got picked. My mom had to sign all these waivers and stuff, and I actually won. And so you're supposed to get an internship with ESPN if you win this. And I was 16 at the time. So they were like, okay, here's who you contact when you turn 18, whatever. And I remember sitting down because the guy that taught all of the journalism classes at Tech, he wanted to have one-on-one meetings with all the journalism majors. And so I remember sitting down with him, and he was like, so what's your goal? What do you want to do? And I was like, I want to do sports journalism. And he looked me dead in the eyeballs and goes, you're not pretty enough for TV and your accent's too thick. And I was like, oh, okay, I don't know how much I value your opinion, but thanks, brother. So in the course of taking his class, I was like, man, I really just don't want to work with this guy anymore. Like, it wasn't so much of a loss as it was that I was like, I hate that guy did that to me.
Yeah.
But again, I have no regrets leaving that behind and choosing this.
Yeah. Sadly, sports medicine not that far behind in many respects, but your generation really marked the big sea change for women in athletic training. I know when I first got to Tech, there were no opportunities for NFL internships for any of our female students, and that's changed dramatically. We had 3 students do NFL internships a couple of summers ago, and obviously you're on the front of the wave of seeing these big changes. So kudos to you and whatever we're going to say to that guy. But sometimes our ship gets steered in a new direction by unsavory characters. Sometimes it's great people, but I'm sorry you had to go through that. So you decide on athletic training, and here in Texas, you can work as a licensed AT, but the guidance that most people give and get is go on and do your national certification. So you were looking at accredited master's programs. Talk me through that season of your life and what that transition was like for you.
Honestly, already being at Texas Tech, it was a no-brainer for me. I'm like, no, I really like Lubbock. I like the scene here. I already know people. And it definitely wasn't something where I was like, oh, no, I'm just going to stay in Texas. I'm just going to be a LAT. Because to be completely honest, I didn't know that much about it. And so I was like, an entry-level program, a master's program is going to help me understand what this job really is. And being a student is one thing, but being able to deep dive and it just being very specific to our job, the master's program was just everything I needed to become a professional. But if you'll remember, that was 2014, and there weren't a lot of master's programs out there. I think there were maybe like 17 or something at the time. I know Arkansas was just getting started then. Texas A&M was just getting started then. And now there's so many more. But I still think that the opportunity that Lubbock gives its Masters of Athletic Training students is so much greater because you have D1, you have NAIA, you have JUCO, you have all these opportunities with high schools, small high schools, big high schools, rural high schools. You have the physician extender positions that are across Lubbock. The only thing that Lubbock doesn't have is a professional something, to my knowledge at least. But and so I just felt like I'm going to figure out which niche I want to get into if I have the opportunity to try all of them.
Right.
And that was something that really sold me with the Tech program versus other programs.
Yeah. You mentioned you came to Tech to cheer, and there are people that will argue with you, and I used to be one of them, but it's certainly athletic and a sport. But finalizing that aspect of your career happened before I met you. So I don't know when that happened, but what was the cessation of your cheer career like for you, and how did you navigate that psychologically?
Honestly, it was time. And my body knew it was time. I knew it was time. So backing up a little bit, I'd always done all-girl teams, and I'm not the smallest human being. So I was always a base. And when I went to Tech, they only had a co-ed team. So in the last senior year of my high school, I spent so much time trying to learn how to be a co-ed cheerleader. And it had drained me so much that I didn't even enjoy the year that I was at Tech cheering. And so I was like, my knees hurt, my ankles hurt, my back hurts. I'm done. And actually, when I stopped cheering, I grew another inch and my foot got a half size bigger. So I think my body was like, yeah, girl, you're done. And so psychologically, I missed it, but I consumed myself. I taught other cheerleaders. I was still around it. I was still involved in the sport. I just wasn't putting my body through the same amount of intense damage, basically.
Yeah. What would you say your identity was at that season of your life as you were getting ready to cross the street and go to the HSC?
Honestly, I don't know. It's almost like a fever dream because I did undergrad in 3 years. I never stopped going to school. I went during summers. I did Christmas semesters. I did everything so quickly. And then I started the master's program before I even turned 21. I graduated on like May 15th or something, and we started the master's program on May 21st. So it wasn't even a thought process. It was just like, okay, here we go, next thing.
Yeah. And that tracks for you. You're definitely an achievement-oriented gal, and don't worry about what's behind. Just focus on what's ahead and knock that out. And that serves you well. You graduate, you start off at Holesville, and you had mentioned baseball was an interest. I'm curious, though, a lot of our students come to the program and they want to work professional sports. Like, that's their thing. And then they'll do some assignments at high schools and realize, hey, I like this better than I thought I would. Did you actively seek out that first high school job, or were you just looking for a job at that stage?
I was looking for a job at that stage, but I'm big on history and stuff. And that's actually where my mom went to high school and elementary school and junior high and all that. And so it was kind of like a full circle moment for us there. I'd been interviewing for a physician extender position, a couple of other things, but I'd applied for professional positions and wasn't getting calls for interviews. And the one interview that I did go on, or I should say had a call for, they were like, this position is for the Dominican Republic and we don't have access for women to go to the bathroom or have their own space. So it's not really going to work out. I'm like, why didn't you even interview me then? So again, we're having a full circle moment here, but I wanted to go back home. I wanted to be around my family a little bit. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go do this for 2 years and I'll see what else is out there. And that's exactly what I did. I lived with my mom, which was great because I saved a bunch of money, and we just had a lot of time to spend together. And after being in Lubbock for 5 years, I think we needed that as a family, be around when my nephew was born and just have a little more family time.
That's great. And so for someone with a background in cheer, Oklahoma City University is a pretty good place to be. Their dance programs, their arts programs are tremendous. So talk me through that transition from high school to your first college job.
Yeah, so I remember vividly, I was in the kitchen when the head athletic trainer at the time, Greg Kerskeeter, called me and he's like, hey, Mikayla, sorry to cold call you. This is Greg. I'm actually driving a bus back that broke down in Lafayette, Louisiana, and was driving past Longview and remembered that you had applied for this position. So here's your interview, which I thought was super funny and just so down to earth and genuine. So Greg won me over from the get-go. But looking at OCU and just their incredible sports programs as a whole, they don't get a ton of respect on campus because of the dance school and the arts and the music and all of that. But they're at, I don't even know now, 80 national championships, something like that. I won 5 while I was there. And it really was interesting setup where they didn't have football. And I was so done working football after being at the high school for 2 years. But I got to work different stuff, soccer and rowing and women's wrestling. And it was a big plus for me as well that they had a really good baseball team and a really good softball team. But my mom and I went up there one weekend and we're looking at apartments and just trying to decide once I'd accepted the job, you know, what I'm going to do. And she's like, well, you should really just buy a house. Okay, so not only am I moving 6 hours away, I'm buying my own house. I'm having to, it was just a spec house. Like I had to put in a fence and change all the light fixtures and just stuff that I'd never done before. So again, it was almost like a fever dream of, okay, we're going to get this done and this is going to be my life now. So it was just me and my dog. And I had one friend who was actually one of my brother's friends that lived up there in Oklahoma City. And that was it. That was the only person I knew when I showed up. I think my second weekend there, my coworker, Randall, who's one of my very best friends now, he was an Oklahoma State grad, and Texas Tech and Oklahoma State were playing in Stillwater. And so we went to the game together, and I was like, I don't think this is a good jumping off point for our work relationship. And Tech absolutely whooped them. And I was like, I'm the only person there in red, like just absolutely being obnoxious, of course. And he still liked me after that. So that turned out well.
Yeah. I remember following you from a distance on social media and seeing your home improvement projects. It's like a dad moment for me to see former students. You got a mortgage now and you're doing all these things. At this point in your life, you've got your second now grown-up job, and you've got a mortgage and a home, graduated early, all these things. What had your relationship been with disappointment or setback or failure or adversity? How would you describe it after year one at OCU?
I think, honestly, at that point, I hadn't really had a lot of adversity to deal with, honestly. And that sounds cliche or whatever you want to call it. The worst thing that happened to me was I made a 46 on my first anatomy exam. Like, that was terrible. I cried all weekend about that. And that sounds so superficial, but at the time, I really hadn't had a whole lot of trouble setting these goals, achieving these goals, doing the next thing. And being in Oklahoma was hard, being away from my family, not having anyone to really hang out with, or if I wanted to just go grab dinner or drinks or something, like I didn't have that kind of backbone that I had back home. But I think in that time, I grew a lot as a person and as an individual, and learned how much I could really do by myself, and learned a lot more about myself and how I handle situations at that point.
So you're at OCU and just idling along, and out of nowhere, the rug gets pulled out from under you. What did the future look like for you before this all happened? What were your plans?
It's funny because I went into OCU going, okay, 2 years. 2 years, I'm going to do something else. 2 years, I'm going to do something else. And in the same way that it pained me to leave Hallsville and leave the kids that I had helped along the way and that hadn't graduated yet, and their families that I'd grown close with, it almost felt the same way when I was at OCU. I'm like, oh, I can't leave now. Like, so-and-so needs me, and no, we're going to win the softball national championship next year, and we're just so close. And part of what kept me at OCU as long as I was there was my relationship with our baseball coach, Denny Craybaugh. He was just the most wonderful human being and welcome with open arms. Him and Keith Lytle were just amazing. Never questioned, oh, she's a girl. Do we really trust her? Should we go to Randall? Just absolutely loving, wonderful human beings. And at the end of my 2 years, going into my third, Denny had gotten sick and had cancer. And I was like, I can't leave. There's no way I'm going to. And he ended up passing the summer before my last year at OCU. And so I'd actually been thinking, maybe this is my year. We did a lot of turnover. We got a new athletic director. They had changed us from being university employees to hospital employees. And I didn't love that. And so I was already thinking, I'm going to start looking. But I didn't expect to do that at 7 a.m. on March 1st.
Yeah. And that's certainly the surprise. Changing jobs is not unheard of, and frankly, it's commonplace a lot of times. And especially if you've got big aspirations of working professional or Power 5, D1, people move, just like coaches. You're constantly working the network, but that usually happens during the summer, or at the very least in between semesters. Yours happened in the middle of the spring, just as baseball's gearing up, basketball's probably winding down, if not done. I mean, the timing of this is a question. And I have to wonder, how prepared were you for that conversation, and where did you go mentally after you had that first meeting?
Oh, no, I was completely blindsided. Actually, they called the meeting, I think, the night before, and I didn't have to be there until 10 o'clock. And so I was in my workout gear. I had my pre-workout in my shaker, like waiting for this meeting to start, not thinking anything about it. And I'd been there almost 5 years at this point. My coworker had been there 7 years at this point. Like, neither one of us had any idea. I'm like, I'm fixing to have this meeting, and then I'm going to go work out. And I brought this big bag of snacks. I had put them in my fridge in the office. Like, no idea whatsoever. And I just remember sitting there and them saying, hey, we're going to take the sports medicine department in a new direction. And I'm going, what do you mean? And they're like, this is going to be effective immediately. I need your keys. I'm like, but like one of my kids texted me, he's bringing me a coffee. Like, my snacks are in the fridge. What do you mean? And so, I mean, I left that meeting just completely devastated, completely shocked and unaware.
This is a pivotal moment, not just in Mikayla's career, but in her life. She had moved to Oklahoma City with 2 years of experience for sure. But after grad school, she'd returned to home of sorts, working in the very same school district where her mom had gone as a kid. But Oklahoma, that was different. She'd bought a house. She'd made it her home. She'd connected with coaches and fellow staff members. And over time, her expected 2-year stint at OCU was on year 5. In her words, she had gotten complacent. But all that changed with an unexpected meeting in the middle of the spring semester. And those dreams of working pro sports that she had long since tucked away in the back of her mind behind the comfort of that current job, they were going to need to be unpacked in a hurry.
Like, walking down the hallway to get my stuff, and they're like, no, you're going to have to set up a time to come get the rest of your stuff. Just take what you can with you today. I'm like, I'm really being escorted off of campus right now. I have to leave. I've got people texting me like, hey, what time can I come in for rehab today? Are you working the game tonight? Blah, 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 whatever. And I'm just like, what? And I remember sitting in my car next to Randall, my coworker, and we're just looking at each other through the windows rolled up. We're just looking at each other like, what just happened? And so we ended up going to his house and just sitting there and just bawling our eyes out. We're getting phone calls from coaches, from players, from former athletes, from other athletic trainers in the area that know us. They're like, I mean, it was like wildfire. It had been 2 hours, and one of the athletic trainers from UCO is calling me like, Mikayla, what happened? Like, how do you even know about this at this point? Right. They had taken down our pictures off the website, and that website hadn't changed in the 5 years that I was there, but my picture was gone. Within, 6 hours of the day, and athletes are like, where are you at? I'm coming to see you. Like, this is not cool. And I'm sitting there thinking the same thing. I'm like, yeah, this is not cool. What the heck do I do now? I never saw it coming.
Yeah. There's the immediacy of it where obviously you're smart. That's a wound that comes out of nowhere, and you're hurt, maybe a little embarrassed or whatever. But then there's also a practical side of this. You've got a mortgage. You've got, I don't know if you had student loans at this time, but the bills don't stop just because your paycheck's due. So this early portion, after you're sorting through the aftermath of it, what were you thinking at that point?
My mom is going to kill me. That's what I was thinking, which is ridiculous because my mom is the most supportive human being on the planet. And I call her immediately as I'm leaving campus. And she's like, Mikayla, don't worry about it right now. Like, we'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. I have a savings account. I can help you if you need help. Just take it down a notch. Understand this is not the time or place to be worried about your mortgage payment in 20 days. And so I really let myself just like wallow in self-pity for 3 days. And then I was like, okay, it's time to start thinking about this stuff. Like, really, how am I going to start paying my bills? Can I withdraw my retirement? What do I need to do to continue to be the independent person that I've been all this time? And it was so hard for me to ask my mom, I'm like, hey, if I need help, will you help me? Which is, again, crazy because she's the most supportive human being on the planet and would do anything for me that I asked. But I didn't want to have to ask because I hadn't had to ask in so long. And that's truly what my identity was, is I'm a young, independent woman. I can do anything. And then it was like, okay, but not anything.
Goosebumps as you said that. You're absolutely right. And I saw that in you as a student. And not pride in a bad way, but just, you can't help but emerge from the athletic setting as a young female without feeling like you have to do it better than others. And to not ask for help is a show of strength, and it's a show of control. And you had always done that. And then all of a sudden, you don't have that control. It's taken from you in a sense. And this timing that makes zero sense, and to this day, I think we can agree that it still doesn't make sense. Like, no one's an emergent danger or something like that, on the surface looks horrible for you. But if you want to work pro baseball, it's actually perfect. Like, you would not have been as viable a candidate for a job in August as you were in March.
All right.
So when does baseball start to enter the equation?
That had always been my goal, right? Everyone wants to work professional, just like you said. I grew up, literally, my mom says, in the dirt at the baseball field. I've always loved baseball. It's an art form for me. Watch it. I watch my college. I watch Texas Tech. I watch professional. Like, I've always loved baseball. And I grew a love for softball too, working at OCU. Don't get me wrong. But I'm like, if not now, when? And so I remember you reached out to me, like, hey, have you talked to Phil? Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, go talk to Phil. And so I called Phil and I'm like, hey, buddy, this is what's going on. He was like, actually, I know that they're looking for someone right now and they want to fill the position like right now. You should apply for the Brewers position. And I'm like, okay, what about the Brewers position? He's like, it's in the DR. And I just am having like flashbacks of when Phil was down here in the DR and him sending me videos of these spiders that were like this big in his dorm room. And I'm like, oh, beggars can't be choosers at this point.
So to recap, Mikayla and a colleague who have a combined 12 years of experience serving their institution are both unceremoniously shown the door and literally escorted out of the building on March 1st, 2023. After 3 days of what she describes as wallowing in the whys, the what ifs, and the what nows, she steadies herself. And like she always had, she starts working the problem. Now, you'll recall that even though she had tried to get a foot in the door with pro baseball in the Dominican Republic years earlier, those doors were closed to women at the time. However, by 2023, all that has changed. The Dominican Republic, or DR as the cool kids in pro baseball like to call it, is currently home to training academies for 28 of the MLB's 30 franchises. And despite some interesting wildlife like ginormous spiders, it has all the beauty and charm of a beachline tropical island, along with sprawling baseball complexes full of players who are top prospects, as well as coaches and staff members like athletic trainers and strength coaches who are working their way up the baseball ladder too. And while Mikayla 5 years earlier wasn't able to find an opportunity, Mikayla 5 years later found herself without a job at the perfect time. And who knows, if she would have finished out the year at Oklahoma City as she had planned, maybe none of this happens. But in March, she's got the inside track on a job, thanks to classmate, minor league baseball AT, and featured guest of episode 60, Phil Milan. And that door that was locked, Mikayla sees her chance to bust through it.
And so I applied and got the interview, and I was like 4 interviews deep by March 11th. Remember, I was fired on March 1st, and they're like, no, we want you to have this position. We want to bring you up to spring training, and then you'll leave the day after Easter. And I'm like, okay. So I sat down and I wrote down the pros and the cons in my mind, right? I'm like, 1, DR, big spiders. I don't speak very good Spanish, if any Spanish at all. I've definitely overestimated my Spanish at that point. Leaving my dog, all of the things. I have to sell my house. I have to move all my stuff back to Texas. I have to do all of these things. So what are my pros? It's professional baseball. I've always wanted to work professional baseball, and I had this opportunity to do so. They have a brand new $1 million+ complex down there. There's other women that already work in the organization. It's a really good salary. And if not now, when? I talked to my mom, and she actually said that my grandpa lived here for a little bit when he was younger. He helped build one of the power plants on the island, and how much he loved being in the DR. And I remember him telling me those stories, but she remembers it better than I do. And he's like, he loved being in the Dominican Republic. This is a full circle moment for him as well, for you to go down there and do what he did, live there for 2 years. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. I put my house on the market. It sold in like 16 hours. I packed everything up by myself. I moved back down to Texas on April 6th, unloaded everything into a storage building, had Easter lunch with my family on April, I think it was 9th or 10th. I don't remember what day. And the next day at 7 a.m., I left DFW and came to the Dominican Republic.
Wow. What a whirlwind, right? Like, it's
29 days start to finish from interview to being on the island working. And I went for a week for spring training in Arizona.
Yeah. What were the emotions like through this process?
Everything. It was everything all at once because I was still grieving my loss of OCU. I was still grieving those relationships that I had created, and at the same time trying to help my friend who also lost his job, and just being scared out of my mind. What if this doesn't work out? Or what if I absolutely hate it? Or what could all possibly go wrong? While also being just like incredibly excited that I have this opportunity, that God has granted me my dream job, genuinely. And even though it's not in the timing that I had originally planned, it's still here. And it's just an absolute blessing that all of the bad things that occurred when they occurred.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a big fan of the movie Inside Out. I don't know, the sequel's coming out very soon, but there's a really poignant scene in there where Riley she lost the hockey game and she's sitting alone and she's just gripped with this sadness. And the dad in me, I get emotional just thinking about it. But in the dialogue, they say the sadness is the signal to the people who love us to rally to our aid. And I have to think that in that moment, you had a network, a family, whether blood or not, who wrapped their arms around you that you wouldn't have had the benefit of knowing they were there. Phil, reaching out for you like that. Your athletes, student athletes who you were serving and rendering care to a week earlier are texting you to check up on you. What was that process like to be on the receiving end of the care instead of the giving end?
It was absolutely incredible because athletic training is most of the time a thankless job. You're day in, day out taking care of other people. And yeah, you get the, oh, thank you so much as they're walking out the door ready to go play, but you never really get the recognition for all the hard work that you do and all the hours. And I remember one time we were hosting the softball World Series opening round and the baseball World Series opening round at OCU. And I worked like 92 hours in 5 days. Something absolutely ridiculous like that. And I remember sitting down at the end of the week being like, one of my baseball parents brought me a cookie from Crumble. That was really nice. And so to be on the receiving end of all of the love that I had poured into them in my time there was just, it was alumni, it was current students, it was just coaches, all the people that I felt were significant in my life, but I didn't know if I was significant in theirs. That was truly an eye-opening experience for me to receive that love as much as I had poured into them.
Yeah, certainly. It has to be a great way to start off a new chapter, to know that as painful as that was and that you wouldn't have chosen it, broken roads can lead to beautiful destinations. And in your case, literally beautiful destinations. I've seen the photos. So tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like right now.
So right now we just started the DSL season, the Dominican Summer League season. And this is rookie ball, but it's international rookie ball. Everyone as an international player starts here. Mostly everyone. There's a few outliers, but like we have a German guy. We had 2 German guys at one point down here, but we have Venezuelans and Panamanians and Dominicans and Nicaraguans and all these different ethnicities just all here together in this little pot. But so I get up about 4:00 in the morning. I live about 40 minutes from our complex. The area I live in is really nice. It's not very touristy, but it does have tourist views. So I feel really safe here. Drive about 40 minutes into work, get everything set up for the day. We've got 3 fields, and we start about 7:30, sometimes a little bit earlier than that, with just a meeting with our strength staff, giving a rundown of, oh, so-and-so was feeling sore yesterday, or here's my rehab plan for this guy. He's coming back from a hamstring, whatever, coordinating that information with them, as well as the coaches. And then once we get started, it's go, 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 hitting, fielding, everything until our game started at 11. And we do that Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We have Wednesdays off. We don't play on Wednesdays unless we have a rain out, in which then we do play on Wednesdays. So I have a Wednesday game this week, but have the games, which are incredibly long because this is rookie ball. There's no pitch clock. There's a lot of changing out of pitchers. It's just like 4.5 hours, I think is the longest game I've worked. And I sit there and I go, okay, I see why the MLB put in the pitch clock. I get it, 100%. But I leave the complex usually 3:30 or so, come home and nap, and try to do something for me at the end of the day. But it's just like working anywhere with 17 to 20-year-old. But so I'm mom, so I'm getting text messages and, hey, I don't feel good, and what should I do? So it really never ends. But I think the greatest thing that I've learned about being here is, and especially for Dominicans, there's no such thing as a bad day. Like, there is no such thing as a bad day. I woke up this morning happy to be alive. And that's I wish I was joking, because there's times that I wake up, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go to work today. I'm so tired. I didn't sleep good last night, whatever. I watched a scary movie and didn't sleep well. And I get to work and they're all just absolutely so excited to start the day. And I'm like, guys, it is 5:30 a.m. I haven't even had coffee yet. Like, it's a great day. It's a great day. Okay. But that's the athletic trainer like. We have to be therapist, mom, best friend, athletic trainer, actually, doctor, psychologist, whatever. We got to wear all the hats because we are their only lifeline, really. And it's a pro and it's a con of this profession.
Sure. Certainly, you are in a great place and with a great organization. What are your dreams like today?
I try to be a realist, right? I don't like to look too far into the future because I feel like you can hope and you can hope, but if you're not moving towards that goal, it's just weighing you down. So in all seriousness, the ultimate goal is major leagues. Absolutely, it's major leagues. That's the dream. It's been the dream. But as for right now, my goal is to make it back to a domestic affiliate, get to have my own team, preferably with the Brewers, but, life happens and there's not always a place for you to move up. So I definitely understand that. But I think the experience of being here and now being bilingual can only help me progress as far as I want to go.
Yeah. If you think about it, it's just remarkable. And I always say there's no such thing as coincidence. It's providence, and seeing things unfold in a way that you just can't help but see God's hand at work. And at this stage for you, it's easy to see the all's well that ends well of it. What did you learn from this rough road that winning all the time wouldn't have taught you?
I think that the biggest lesson that I learned is that I'd gotten complacent. And that's not something I ever wanted to describe myself as a complacent person. Because again, this was my dream, this was my goal, and I'd kind of given up on it because I'd become complacent. I was happy where I was, happy enough where I was, I should say, happy enough that I wasn't doing anything to make myself better. I wasn't going after the things that I wanted to from the get-go. And really, the snakes in the grass pushed me, shoved me into a position where I do learn something new every day. I can see how I'm growing as a professional, how I'm growing as a person, how I'm growing as a leader every day. Whereas if I'd stayed at OCU, I don't think that I know for a fact I wouldn't be bilingual. I know that I wouldn't have as many new ideas and all the different continuing education that the Brewers have done for me. I wouldn't be the leader that I've become since being here. And I wouldn't get to wake up every morning and go, today's a good day.
And I'll also add to that, if you don't go through what you go through, then an opportunity isn't created for Kristen, a recent grad of our program who was a student athlete of yours. You create an opportunity for her. So the ripples that change can make sometimes are just remarkable. I'm so proud of you and so happy to see you fulfilled and actualized. It's inspiring for me to see how you've navigated this transition. And It's foolish to say that all's well that ends well, because no one would choose to go through hard things, but you're proof positive that that meeting on the 1st was a far cry from your first day on the job on the 29th, and a lot can change. You're to be applauded for that. We're almost done here. I always ask this one, if we were to watch a montage of your life, what song would play in the background and why?
Oh, that's hard. I'm going to go with Till You Can't by Cody Johnson.
Till you can't. If you got a chance, take it.
Okay. That's a little country for me to even have anything to comment, I'm guessing. But the East Texas gal, I'll allow it.
If you're gonna love somebody, hold them as long and as strong and as close as you can. Till you can't.
And it's just about keep chasing your dreams, keep going, keep being yourself until you can't. Yeah. And waking up, like, some days you're like, oh, I really don't want to go help my grandpa build this car, but there'll be a day that you can't.
Yeah.
And so that's really speaking to me in my life right now. Like I've said, I think 2 or 3 times now, if not now, when?
Yeah. That's sage advice. So the very last question, and you've answered this one, but maybe make it even a little bit more personal. What for Mikayla is left undone?
I think more so personally, my personal life is still undone. I have put that on hold to be here to do this job. I really miss my dog. As far as professionally, I think what I've left undone is I still need to continue following these players that I've connected with, these relationships that I've created. I think that's something special about being here, is that I get to see the very beginning. And some of these guys are going to fizzle out and this is it for them. But there's some of these guys that are going to make it all the way to the major leagues. And I hope to be there with them. But if I'm not, it's still undone for me until they get there.
Yeah. That's exciting. Powerful. Well, Mikayla, I know you've got a lot going on, and I certainly thank you for dropping by and sharing your story. You're invited back anytime, but thanks again for dropping in.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Mikayla Moore, and I am undone.
I'm thankful to Mikayla for dropping in, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation. For more info on today's episode, be sure to check it out on the web. Simply go to undonepodcast.com/EP89 to see the notes, links, and images related to today's guest, Mikayla Moore. I know there are great stories out there to be told, and I'm always on the lookout. So if you or someone you know has a story that we can all be inspired by, for real, tell me about it. Surf on over to undonepodcast.com, click the contact tab in the top menu, and drop me a note. I had 2 pieces of news this week about former guests that I wanted to pass along. First, congratulations are in order for my guest from episode 60, who we even talked about in this episode, now Detroit Tigers organization athletic trainer, Phil Milan. Phil and his wife recently welcomed their first child, Omari, into the world just a few days ago. So shout out to the Milan family. Get some rest. On the other side of the coin, I also recently received word that former guest Tim Kite from episode 46 passed away after a tough fight with cancer. Tim was an incredible inspiration to countless people. My thoughts and prayers go out to his family. He's already missed. Coming up on the show, I'm working on a new multi-part series on former UNLV running rebel, Charlotte Hornet, and New York Knick, Larry Johnson. I'm also working on a new project to discuss the life, lessons, and legacy of former Arizona football head coach Dick Tomey. This and more coming up on Becoming Undone. Becoming Undone is a Nitro Hype creative production written and produced by me, Toby Brooks. Tell a friend about the show. Follow along on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Becoming Undone Pod. And follow me at Toby J. Brooks on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Check out my link tree at linktr.ee/Toby J. Brooks. Listen, subscribe, and leave me a review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Till next time, keep getting better.